Welcome to Toxic Theatre Storytime, where we find the most ludicrous rehearsal and performance horror stories. Today we're starting off with, has an actor ever been kicked out of a show during a performance by your director? If so, why? I got fired from a show mid-production. I was involved in a pretty elaborate fight scene in which I was thrown around the stage. So my fight partner and I would run the scene on stage before every show, as you do in a show with fight choreography. We would often have to clear the stage ourselves because no one ever bothered to do it. The playwright was also the director, and he had one of his drinking buddies being the stage manager, and stuff never seemed to get done. It was a really frustrating production. Actually, it was a nightmare. He kept changing stuff, so some of us were learning new lines during dress rehearsal. One night, we couldn't rehearse our fight at all because, without telling any of us, the director had decided to have his friend's band play before the performance, and there was a full drum kit on the stage. I walked out front to find the director drinking beers with his buddies, and I said, "Hey, we really need to run our fight call before the show." Why? It's Stage Combat 101. You mark the fight sequence every night before the performance so that it doesn't get sloppy and no one gets hurt. We've been off for 4 days. If you had let us know that there was going to be a band tonight, we could have come in earlier. He laughed and said, "Well, I guess you're just going to have to not get sloppy then, aren't you?" This was the last straw with this guy. I said, "You know what? We'll figure it out. Just like we figured out everything else on this show while you've had your head up your ass." We did the show that night as usual, but when I showed up the next night, no one else was there. The director was standing out front with a paper bag and a big smile on his face. "You're fired. Here's your stuff." "No show tonight, I take it?" "No, we're going to take this weekend off while we replace you." I could tell that he was bothered that I wasn't upset. By the way, I was the lead. I was on stage for the entire show. I had about 60% of the lines. "Well, good luck to you." I looked in the bag, and it was full of somebody else's stuff. "This isn't my stuff." I started to walk into the theater. "You can't go in there. My property is in there. I am going to retrieve it. You can try to stop me. In fact, I really hope you do." He didn't try to stop me. The show never reopened. I don't really have any regrets because I know the rest of the cast was unhappy too. It didn't hurt my reputation any either. People were either completely unaware of what happened, or they knew the guy was an a-hole. If you ever find yourself in a position like this, honestly, OP did a pretty good job of trying to stick with it as far as I can tell. Even at the end there, OP was doing their best to keep the show moving forward within safety protocols. It's true OP could have handled things a bit better by not calling the director an a-hole in the process, but it sounds like the whole cast may have been stretched pretty thin at this point. The one thing I do want to point out is in a show with a new script or a new playwright, it is pretty standard that the playwright will be changing things all the way until the performances start, and then even sometimes into the performances. That said, that should be made clear in the audition material so everyone's on the same page right from the beginning. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Moving on, we have "Oh, the memories come flooding back." One particularly bad director laid down the law regarding timekeeping by saying that if anyone was ever late to rehearsals, we'd find the theater locked, and that if any of us were more than 10 minutes late, then turn around and go home, as he wasn't going to hold up rehearsals for anyone. This was a professional, well-paid production in London prior to going on an international tour. He also said that he didn't believe actors should annotate scripts or make notes, so he banned pens and pencils from rehearsals. Hold up. The quick intermission here. This is absolutely wild already. You should totally make notes during rehearsals just in case anyone else needs to learn from your notes. If someone misses rehearsal that day, you can help them, but it also, of course, helps you remember what you worked on that day and what the blocking is. Anyway, let's keep on going forward here. Second day in, and there was a tube failure, so half a dozen or so cast were about 20 minutes late. When he unlocked the door and let them in, he berated them in front of everyone else and repeated his rule that anyone late should go home. He sent the late arrivals home. Of course, that meant that we couldn't actually rehearse much of anything that day. Third day, he flew off the handle when he saw someone making a note in their script. Fourth day, train delays, sent latecomers home. Fifth day, he was half an hour late himself. I called a company meeting. We sent him home. That's awesome. He was an awful man, and the show was an awful show. I want to commend OP for both of these first stories for reaching out and actually speaking up against their terrible director. So often when we find ourselves in these toxic working environments, we feel the need to stay quiet, but these two OPs did a good job of speaking up and supporting their fellow actors in doing so. There's a lot that doesn't make sense in this story. For example, the director not allowing anyone who's late to stay for rehearsal, it just makes it more difficult for everyone, and you end up not being able to rehearse things, as the OP said. It's never ideal for people to be late, but the least you can do as a director is keep rehearsal moving forward, so when they do arrive, you can incorporate them seamlessly. Our last story today is Advice Needed for a Bad Director. What are my options? I was recently cast as Charlie in The Foreigner. I was initially excited, but after only 2 weeks of rehearsals, I'm regretting auditioning for the role. I've been involved in quite a few productions in my lifetime, and I thought I had experienced every level and type of director out there. Some bad, most good, and a few truly great ones. This latest director, all intentions aside, is just about the worst I've had to work with. In our first rehearsal after everything was blocked, the director gave multiple line readings to everyone. In fact, the notes he gave took longer than the actual run-through of the scene. He told me how to stand, how to walk, and even how to keep my facial expressions. He told me to develop a stutter for one particular line, but to not keep that for any other line. During one segment of the scene, there were 3 of us on stage. The 2 other characters engage in a long dialogue until one of them leaves to be replaced by another actor who says a line which is supposed to shock me. During that long 7 to 8 minutes of conversations, I've been directed to lay down on a couch with my face in a pillow. It's awkward and doesn't make much sense to my character or the scene. It feels like I'm dead on the couch. When I pushed back a little, the director said it was for the bit and it'll be funny and moved on. I feel like a robot regurgitating lines who has no choice in character development. I'm usually quick to memorize lines, but I have a feeling of anger and dread as I go through the process, knowing that however I decide to deliver a line, I'll be given a reading from the director without any input from the other cast members or whatever natural flow we may have landed on. I have always been an easygoing person, and I have heard from directors that I have been a dream to work with in the past. In fact, the producer from this show was contacted by a former director of mine telling them that I would be great for the role, who in turn reached out to me to invite me to audition. I'm happy to take direction and trust the director in whatever notes they give me. However, with this new director, the cast hasn't even had an opportunity to memorize lines and develop characters together. It's all being spoon-fed to us line by line. I don't want to be considered a diva. I do understand the difficult job which is required of a director, so much so in fact, that I don't think I'll ever want to direct a show. I sincerely want to put on a successful show, and I want everyone to be proud of what was produced and have a star of a production to put on a resume. So here is my dilemma. Rehearsals are a dread. I hate coming to them, as do a few other actors. Do I quit since we are only 2 weeks in to allow more time to find a replacement? Do I just put up with it? Do I pull the director aside to have a critical conversation about their directing style? This is a difficult situation to be in. In the performance industry, we all find ourselves in productions where we question how the show is going, and the best thing that you can do in those situations is the third option that OP laid out here, which is reach out to the director or whoever you have concerns about and see if you can have a constructive conversation with them. If that conversation doesn't go well or leads to further tension, then you might actually want to back out of the show and let them find a replacement. 2 weeks in, I would say, is the tipping point as a performer where you have to either stick with it or back out. Obviously, I don't support backing out of a production, but sometimes you have to do what's best for your own mental health. I would also say reach out to your fellow cast members to build camaraderie and see if you can work together to build a show that you end up being proud of. If you have a rehearsal or performance horror story that you'd like to share, head over to r/blinkingeyetheater. And as always, blink twice.